Knights of the Old Republic is one of the best RPGs ever made, and after the announcement of a remake at last year's PlayStation Showcase, fans have been clamoring to get another glimpse of what's to come. But it looks like recreating a masterpiece isn't so simple after all, because apparently the game's in development hell. So who's taking over the project, and will it ever see the light of day? Well, let's find out. First off, what happened to the KOTOR remake? When you set out to remake one of the most beloved games of all time, you've got to make sure that you do it right. And to be fair, while Knights of the Old Republic isn't exactly that old, or at least doesn't feel like due to its strong RPG elements, it really hasn't aged well visually, so a refresh was definitely needed. That said, perhaps Bioware would have been a better steward of the project because, well, they made the original, but then again, it's not like they're having the time of their life over there either. Now, Embracer's still a relatively new publisher, so they're bound to have their off days. The main developer, Aspyr, on the other hand, has been doing it for a long time, so it's kinda weird to see them struggle with a game of this type. That said, the project going off the rails wasn't actually due to its scope or complexity. We mean, how difficult would it even be to paste modern visuals on top of an already excellent gameplay loop? The point is that the real reason behind KOTOR's delay is bad management. Apparently, Aspyr's studio heads handed out some really unrealistic deadlines to create a demo in time for E3, which derailed the rest of the production. Plus, they also wanted the full game to be done by the end of this year, which in times like these is also an impossible goal. So now they're handing it over to another dev. Up next, Aspyr hands off the development to Saber Interactive. Now, all of this turmoil meant that the Knights of the Old Republic had to be delayed by a few years. Despite the delay, though, it seems like Embracer and Disney really aren't happy with the way things are progressing. Like, of course, the development has been super slow over the past couple of years, but you could chalk that down to the pandemic as well. After all, many other teams around the world have been affected by similar issues. What isn't acceptable, though, is the state of the game right now. According to a report by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, the real problem with the remake is the fact that it's just not good enough. In fact, the situation's been so dire that they're ready to shift the entire project to another studio. Obviously, Aspyr wouldn't have wanted to let this opportunity go because, well, they've been a support studio throughout their history. Plus, they haven't really taken on many big projects apart from some ports and an Indigo Prophecy remaster a few years ago. So this was really their chance to announce themselves on the big stage and perhaps even follow the likes of Bluepoint Studios. But it looks like it's too late for that to happen because Embracer has decided to hand the project to another one of their studios, Saber Interactive, which has a lot more experience with this stuff. Besides, they were serving as a support studio for this game before anyway. Now, can Saber Interactive turn the ship around? It's always a big gamble when you switch personnel in the middle of a development, and obviously there's also a massive chance of the project getting derailed even further. We mean, how probable is it that the two different studios have aligned goals for a game? Also, the Embracer Group haven't exactly been very helpful in the development process either, so there are definitely a lot of question marks looming over this move. That being said, if there was a team within the publisher's umbrella that could have handled an undertaking of this size, it's probably Saber Interactive. Why? Well, for starters, they've got an insane amount of experience remaking AAA games from scratch while maintaining the original vision. Like, this is their bread and butter. For instance, they've been heavily involved in a bunch of Halo remakes, including Combat Evolved Anniversary, which by the way is absolutely fantastic. On top of that, they've done work for CD Projekt with the Witcher ports too. At the same time, Saber's actually much bigger than people realize. Like, they were making their own engines back in the day, and even now they have multiple teams working under them. As a matter of fact, technically, even Aspyr counts as one of its subsidiaries. So yeah, the roots go deep. Besides, with so many projects like a new Painkiller game and Evil Dead currently on their plate, they probably need all that firepower to handle the extra workload anyway. Also, how different will the remake be in comparison to the original? We're in a time where literally everyone is trying to capitalize on nostalgia and remake old franchises. Like, within the next 12 months alone, we're seeing so many different rehashes like The Last of Us Part 1 and Dead Space, but they're only being made because there's demand for it. You see, the video game industry runs in cycles, with trends repeating themselves after every few years. For instance, when the PS4 launched, we also saw a bunch of remasters and remakes making their way onto that console. So it's not out of the ordinary to have a bunch of this stuff at the start of a new generation. Now, there are a couple of reasons why that happens. One, these projects are cheaper and take less time, so devs can push them out faster. Plus, you gotta make use of that extra power and get accustomed to the hardware. Oh, and of course, they sell a ton of units as well. When it comes to KOTOR though, things are a bit complicated because while there's absolutely a need to improve upon the visuals, the gameplay still kinda holds up. In fact, we'd say that turning the combat into real-time action might even even anger fans. But in this day and age, it's hard to ship a turn-based mainstream game anyway. Plus, there's the issue of changing the story to match the new Star Wars canon, which apparently is gonna line up with Respawn's Jedi Survivor, so a lot's gonna change. That said, does this point to a bigger issue at Embracer Group? Okay, so Embracer's still a relatively new player within the gaming industry, but at the same time, they haven't taken a long time to get things going. Like, if you're gonna compare them to other entrants, it'd be hard to argue against their supposed success, especially against the likes of Google. Besides, they've been on a pretty insane spending spree, picking up a ton of massive studios like Square Enix's Western branch, Gearbox, and Deep Silver. Having said that, this is a complicated sport, and spending money is only half the battle. The next step, which is managing all these teams, is a whole other beast, and in that regard, you could argue that the group hasn't actually been doing that well. For instance, we've heard several reports of projects being in development hell under their watch. Plus, Saints Row, which is the only game that they have published so far after a full dev cycle, got really bad reviews. So currently, they're definitely not the best when it comes to giving direction to their teams. On top of that, with over 120 studios under their watch, things aren't looking that great for the future either. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not trying. Like, it can be hard to operate in this industry if you're expanding at the rate of knots. And perhaps what they need is a string of successful games to get things going. And finally, when can we expect KOTOR to come out? Whenever a game goes into development hell, it can be super hard to predict when it'll come out. In fact, in most cases, you could even hedge your bets on a cancellation. That being said though, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is just too important of a project to scrap at this point. We mean, for starters, it's being funded by Sony, which adds some extra pressure to deliver. Plus, it's been in the works for at least 3 years at this point, but we all know that switching a developer probably puts an extra few years on top of the already projected timings. Now, the KOTOR remake was initially slated for a 2022 release date. Plus, after that delay at Aspyr, it got pushed to a more realistic target of 2025, and perhaps it would have made that date had the old studio continued to work on it. Since that isn't the case anymore though, we're probably looking at it taking an extra year on top of that, sending it to 2026 or even a 2027 release date. That said, you gotta start asking if it's even worth working on a project if it's gonna take that long. But then again, it's not like other studios like Quantic Dreams are having the time of their lives with their Star Wars projects either. Besides, Saber Interactive's a team full of industry veterans, so if anyone's even remotely capable of pulling this rabbit out of the hat, it's them. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think that the Knights of the Old Republic will ever see the light of day? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.